This one tells a story about our family, and this one is for...
When 6-year-old Mila pointed to the scar on a stranger's arm and said her mom had the same one, no one expected what came next. What he revealed about her missing mother left everyone frozen. Watch until the end to discover the secret behind Code 41B. Like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. The sky hung low over Maple Hill, a bruised, purple, threatening rain that never came. Mila Carter walked beside Molly, her small hand wrapped around the volunteer's fingers, her sneakers scraping the sidewalk in a rhythm that had become familiar over the past 3 weeks. The walk home from the community center took exactly 14 minutes. Mila had counted every day since her mother stopped being there to count with her. Today, something was wrong. Mila felt it before she saw it, a prickling at the back of her neck, the way the air seemed to hold its breath. Their house, the small blue one with the crooked mailbox and the rose bushes her mother had planted the spring before, looked different. The front door stood open, not all the way, just enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. "Molly," Mila whispered, her voice catching. The volunteer stopped, her grip tightening. "Stay behind me, sweetheart." They approached slowly. The smell hit them first. Fresh paint, chemical and sharp, cutting through the usual scent of grass and distant barbecue smoke. Voices floated from inside. Male voices, confident, loud. A man appeared in the doorway. He wore a suit that looked too expensive for this neighborhood, his shoes gleaming despite the dusty porch. Behind him, another man carried a stack of folders, papers rustling like dry leaves. "Can I help you?" Molly's voice came out steadier than her trembling hand suggested. The suited man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're the new owners. Property transfer completed yesterday." He held up a document, the paper crisp and white, covered in stamps and signatures that meant nothing to a 6-year-old, but everything to the world that controlled her life. Mila's chest tightened. She looked past the men, into the hallway where her mother's coat still hung on the hook, where her own drawings were still taped to the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway. "There must be a mistake," Molly said. "Evelyn Carter owns this house. She's lived here for..." Evelyn Carter defaulted on payments. The man's voice carried the boredom of someone who had said these words many times before. "The property has been legally transferred. You have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings. 1 box each." Mrs. Henderson watched from her porch across the street, her hand pressed to her mouth. Old Mr. Peterson stood at his window, his face pale behind the glass. Down the block, a teenager named Marcus lifted his phone, recording silently, his jaw tight with anger he couldn't name. Molly knelt beside Mila. "We're going to figure this out, okay? But right now, I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" Mila nodded, though her eyes burned. Inside, the house already felt foreign. The men had moved things, her mother's book stacked carelessly, the kitchen chairs pushed against walls, papers scattered across the table. One of them tracked mud across the carpet. Her mother vacuumed every Sunday. Mila moved through the rooms like a ghost, her fingers trailing surfaces that held memories. Her bedroom door was open. Someone had already been through her things. Her stuffed rabbit lay on the floor, knocked from its place on her pillow. She picked it up, held it close, breathed in the fading scent of her mother's perfume that still clung to the fabric. 1 box, the suited man called from the living room. Clocks ticking. Mila's hands shook as she gathered what she could. Clothes, her rabbit, the photograph from her nightstand, her and her mother at the beach last summer, both of them laughing at something the camera couldn't capture. Then she saw it. Tucked behind her bookshelf, pressed into the narrow gap between wood and wall, was an envelope. Yellow, slightly crumpled, with her mother's handwriting on the front. Just 2 words. For Mila, her heart hammered. She glanced toward the door. The men were arguing with Molly about something, their voices rising. Quickly, she slipped the envelope into her jacket pocket, feeling its weight against her hip like a secret. Outside, the sky had darkened further. Neighbors gathered on porches now, murmuring, pointing. Someone had called the community center. Someone else had called a lawyer who wasn't answering. Mila stood on the sidewalk, clutching her box, watching strangers move through her home like they belonged there. The suited man pulled the door shut, and the click of the lock echoed through her bones. She reached into her pocket, touched the envelope's edge. Molly was speaking to someone on her phone, her voice urgent but distant, like sound underwater. "Mr." Peterson approached, his old hands wringing together, saying something about those people, and happened to the Garcias too. But Mila wasn't listening. She opened the envelope carefully, her small fingers trembling. Inside was a card, old, creased, the kind you might find in a vintage shop. On it, written in her mother's careful script, was a phone number and 3 characters that meant nothing to her. 41B, beneath the number, a single line. If anything happens to me, call this, tell them the code. They'll understand. Mila stared at the card, the numbers blurring through her tears. Somewhere inside the house that was no longer hers, a light turned on. The wind picked up as Mila stood on the sidewalk, the card trembling in her grip. Cars passed in a steady rhythm, their headlights sweeping across her face. But she didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed fixed on her mother's handwriting, tracing each letter like a lifeline. Mila. Molly crouched beside her, phone still pressed to her ear. What do you have there? Mila handed her the card without speaking. The volunteer's face changed. Confusion, then concern, then something sharper. Fear, maybe, or hope disguised as fear. Where did you find this? Behind my bookshelf. Mama hid it. Molly read the note again, her lips moving silently. The phone call she'd been making. Some helpline. Some agency. Suddenly seemed less important. She ended it without saying goodbye. 41B, she murmured. Do you know what this means? Mila shook her head. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson called out. You need anything, honey? Water? Something to eat? Molly waved her off with a tight smile, then guided Mila toward a bench near the corner, away from the house, away from the men in suits who were now pulling the curtains shut inside. Your mom, Molly said carefully. Did she ever mention this number, or this code? No. Mila hugged her rabbit tighter. But she was scared the last few weeks. She kept checking the locks. She made me memorize where to hide if bad people came. Molly's throat tightened. She remembered Evelyn at the community center, the way she'd started lingering after picking Mila up, asking questions about legal aid, about what to do if someone threatened you, about whether anyone could just take your home. She'd tried to help. They all had, but Evelyn had smiled and said she was fine, just curious, just making conversation. Now, 3 weeks later, Evelyn was gone and strangers owned her house. I'm going to call this number, Molly said. Is that okay? Mila nodded. The phone rang 4 times. Molly almost hung up. Then a voice. Low, rough, careful. Who is this? My name is Molly Chen. I'm a volunteer at the Riverside Community Center. I'm with a little girl named Mila Carter. Her mother is Evelyn Carter. She's been missing for 3 weeks, and Mila found an envelope with this number and a code, 41B. Silence, long enough that Molly checked if the call had dropped. Then, how old is the girl? 6. Another pause. Molly could hear breathing on the other end, slow and deliberate, like someone forcing themselves to stay calm. Is she safe right now? Yes. She's with me, but someone just took her house. Men with documents saying Evelyn defaulted on payments. It happened fast, too fast. Where are you? Molly gave the address. The man, she assumed it was a man, wrote something down. She could hear the scratch of pen on paper. Don't go anywhere, don't talk to anyone else about that code. I'll be there tomorrow morning. Wait, who are you? How do you know Evelyn? The voice softened. Just barely. She saved my life once. Told me if anyone ever came to me with that code, I had to help them, no matter what. The line went dead. Mila tugged at Molly's sleeve. What did he say? He's coming. Tomorrow. Molly stared at the phone in her hand, her mind racing. He said your mom saved his life, for the first time in 3 weeks. Something flickered in Mila's eyes, not quite hope. She was too young to name it, but something close. A crack in the numbness. Mr. Peterson shuffled over, his coat buttoned wrong, his face creased with worry. That company. Heard about them before. The Hartwell Group. They've been buying up properties all over the South Side. Folks say they use dirty tricks, forged signatures, pressure tactics. Molly's blood chilled. Forged signatures. That's the rumor. He glanced at the house, now dark except for one window. Never thought they'd come here. Evelyn was careful. Paid everything on time. I saw her checks. She showed me once when I helped her with the mailbox. Something clicked into place. Evelyn wasn't behind on payments. She never had been. Whatever had happened, whatever had made her disappear, it wasn't random. And whoever was coming tomorrow, the man with the rough voice who owed Evelyn his life, might be the only person who could unravel it. Mila pressed her face into her rabbit's worn fur. Mama said people would come, she whispered. She said to trust the code. Molly wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against the cold. Then we trust the code. Morning broke pale and quiet over Maple Hill, the kind of stillness that made every sound sharper, the creak of a gate, the distant bark of a dog, the rumble of an approaching engine. Mila sat on Mrs. Henderson's porch, where she'd spent the night in the guest room that smelled of lavender and old books. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw strangers walking through her house. Touching her things, locking her out, Molly arrived early, coffee in hand, dark circles under her eyes. She'd spent the night making calls, hitting dead ends, leaving messages that went unanswered at exactly 8 o'clock. A truck pulled onto the street, old but well-maintained, the kind of vehicle that had seen work and carried weight. It stopped in front of Mrs. Henderson's house, and 4 men stepped out. The neighborhood held its breath. Raphael Knox was the first to emerge, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair, and a face that had seen things he never talked about. He wore a simple flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and on his right forearm, a scar curved like a crescent moon, pale against his dark skin. Old but unmistakable, the others followed. Jonas Pike, lean and watchful, his eyes scanning the street with the precision of someone who'd learned to notice everything. Caleb Monroe, younger, softer around the edges, carrying a notebook and a gentle expression. Silas Granger, quiet and methodical, already studying the house across the street where the suited men had done their work. They approached the porch slowly, aware of the eyes watching from every window. Mila. Raphael's voice was low, careful, the same voice from the phone. He crouched to meet her level, his movements deliberate. "I'm Raphael, your mama and I. We were friends, a long time ago." Mila studied his face, searching for something she couldn't name. Then her gaze dropped to his arm, to the scar, and her breath caught. "Mama has one like that," she said softly. "On her arm?" She said it was from before I was born, from when she helped someone. The men exchanged glances. Raphael's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "That's right, she helped me, and now I'm here to help you." Across the street, a curtain moved. Caleb noticed first. He always noticed, and nodded toward it. "We've got an audience." Jonas studied the document still posted on the door of the Carter house, visible even from this distance. "Those papers look official, but something's wrong. The seal's off. I've seen this before." "Seen what?" Molly stepped forward, arms crossed against the morning chill. "Fraud." Jonas said the word simply, without drama. "Someone's been playing games with property records. This isn't just about one house." Mrs. Henderson appeared with a tray of coffee cups, her hands steady despite her age. "About time someone came," she said. "That poor woman was terrified in the weeks before she vanished. Kept to herself, stopped going to church. I should have said something." Raphael accepted a cup, nodding his thanks. "Did she mention anything specific? Anyone threatening her?" "No names, but she asked me once. Hypothetically, she said, what I'd do if someone powerful wanted to take everything I had." The old woman's voice trembled. "I didn't have an answer for her." Down the street, a car slowed. Dark sedan, tinted windows. It lingered for a moment, then drove on without stopping. Silas watched it go, memorizing the license plate without being obvious about it. "They're watching," he said quietly. "Let them watch." Raphael set down his cup and crossed to the Carter house, his steps measured and calm. The others followed, forming a loose perimeter. Jonas examined the document on the door up close, his fingers hovering over the signature. Evelyn Carter. But see how the Y loops. It's wrong. Evelyn's handwriting was sharper. "I remember from the letters she wrote during—" He stopped, glancing at Mila. "During what?" The girl had followed them, her rabbit clutched to her chest. Raphael knelt again, meeting her eyes. "Your mama helped a lot of people once. People who were trying to change their lives. She wrote letters for us when no one else would, got us into programs, found us jobs." He paused, weighing how much to say. "We owed her everything. We still do." Mila reached into her pocket and pulled out the card. "The one with the code, 41B, she said. "What does it mean?" Raphael took the card gently, turning it over in his hands. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Old memory, old pain, something breaking and reforming. "It means she trusted me to protect you." He handed the card back. "And that's exactly what I'm going to do." A neighbor across the street, a young woman with sharp eyes and a smartphone, stepped onto her porch. "You're here about the house," she called. "You should know. There's an organization that's been tracking these cases. I can get you their number." The web was beginning to form. Mila looked up at Raphael, her small hand reaching for his. He took it without hesitation. The afternoon brought clouds but no rain. The sky a muted gray that seemed to press down on the neighborhood. Inside Mrs. Henderson's living room, the group gathered around a table covered in papers. Documents Jonas had photographed from the Carter house. Notes Molly had taken from her calls. Records Silas had pulled from public databases using his phone. Mila sat on the floor by the window, her rabbit in her lap, listening to everything without understanding most of it. But she understood the feeling in the room, the way the adults spoke in low voices, the way Raphael's hands sometimes trembled when he reached for a paper, the way everyone kept glancing at her, checking if she was okay. She wasn't okay, but she was trying. "Start from the beginning," Caleb said, his pen poised over his notebook. "How did you know Evelyn?" Raphael leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. 12 years ago, different lifetime. He paused, collecting words like scattered stones. "I was trying to get out, trying to leave everything behind. The streets, the trouble, the people who wanted me to stay in that life. But leaving isn't simple. There are debts, obligations, people who don't let you walk away." The room was silent. "Someone set me up, made it look like I'd done something I hadn't. I was about to lose everything. My freedom, my chance to start over." He touched the scar on his arm, unconsciously. "Evelyn found me hiding in a church basement. She didn't know me, had no reason to help, but she brought me food, bandaged this," he indicated the scar, "and spent 3 days tracking down proof that I'd been framed." Mila's head lifted. "Mama did that. She did. Never asked for anything in return. Just said if I ever had a chance to help someone else, I should take it." Raphael's voice caught. "She made me promise. Told me if anyone ever came to me with that code, 41B, I had to answer. No questions." Jonas spread out the photographed documents. "These property transfers started appearing 6 months ago. Same pattern every time. Owners suddenly default on payments. Paperwork appears overnight. Families are out within a week. The Hartwell Group," Silas added. "On paper, they're a real estate investment firm, but their practices," he shook his head. "I've found at least 8 families in this neighborhood alone who've lost their homes the same way." Molly's phone buzzed. She read the message, her face darkening. The community center coordinator just confirmed Evelyn had been coming to her for weeks before she disappeared. Said she had evidence of something, documents that proved the fraud, but she was scared to go public. "Why scared?" Caleb asked. "Because whoever's behind this isn't just some company." She said there were threats, subtle ones. A car following her, a note left on her windshield. Someone told her to mind her own business or think about what happens to little girls who lose their mothers. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mila's grip tightened on her rabbit. She didn't fully understand the words, but she felt them. The weight of danger, the shadow of something larger than she could see. Raphael stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, the street was quiet. Normal, but normal didn't mean safe anymore. "She disappeared because of this," he said, his voice rough. "She found something they didn't want found, and now they're trying to erase her completely. Take her house, take her records, make it look like she never existed. But she does exist." Mila's voice was small but fierce. "She's my mama. She's real." Raphael turned to face her. For a moment, the hard lines of his face softened, and something broken showed through. Grief, maybe, or guilt, or the kind of hope that hurts. "You're right," he said. "She's real, and we're going to find her." Outside, Mr. Peterson crossed the street toward Mrs. Henderson's house, a folder tucked under his arm. He knocked twice, then let himself in. His breathing labored from the walk. "Found something," he said, spreading papers on the table. "Old records from the neighborhood association. Evelyn requested copies of these 2 months ago. Land surveys, original property deeds, transfer histories going back 30 years. He pointed to a highlighted section. "See this. The Hartwell Group didn't exist until 18 months ago, but they claim to have held title to half these properties for a decade." Jonas leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "Fabricated history. They're not just forging signatures. They're creating entire paper trails." Caleb closed his notebook. "We need a lawyer, someone who knows property law, who can challenge these documents officially." "I know someone," Silas said quietly. "Worked with her on a housing case last year. She does pro bono work. Might be willing to help." The pieces were coming together. Slowly, imperfectly, but together. Raphael looked at Mila, still sitting by the window, her rabbit clutched to her chest. Her mother was out there, somewhere, hiding, maybe, hurt, maybe, but alive. He had to believe she was alive. "We find the evidence," he said. "We find Evelyn, and we make them answer for what they've done." The next morning, Maple Hill woke to something it hadn't seen in years. Neighbors talking to each other, really talking, not just polite waves or brief hellos, but gathering on porches, sharing coffee, exchanging stories that had been buried under the weight of daily survival. Raphael stood in Mrs. Henderson's front yard, a folding table set up before him, covered in maps, printed documents, and handwritten notes. Jonas worked beside him, sorting papers into stacks. Caleb sat nearby with his notebook. Interviewing anyone who approached, Silas was on his phone, coordinating with contacts across the city. It started with Mrs. Henderson bringing out a tray of pastries. Then Mr. Peterson arrived with his folder of records. Then the young woman from down the street, Maria Santos, showed up with her phone full of videos and screenshots. "I've been documenting this for months," Maria said, scrolling through her gallery. "Look, this is the day they came to the Garcia house, 3 weeks before they came to the Carters. Same men, same documents, same story." The video played. Suited men at a door, papers being thrust forward, a family standing helpless on their own porch. The audio was muffled, but the body language spoke clearly. Intimidation, dismissal, power wielded without conscience. "Did anyone file complaints?" Caleb asked, pen moving. "We tried. The police took reports, but nothing happened. The city housing department said the paperwork was in order." Maria's voice tightened with frustration. "It's like they've got connections everywhere." More people came. The Martinez family from 3 blocks over, who'd been fighting a similar case for 2 months. Old Mrs. Chen, who remembered when the neighborhood was different, who had files going back decades. Teenagers who'd witnessed things they hadn't known were significant until now. Mila watched from the porch steps, her rabbit in her lap. Molly sat beside her, one arm wrapped around her shoulders. "Look at all these people," Molly said softly. "They all want to help find your mom." Mila nodded, but her eyes stayed on Raphael. She watched the way he spoke to each person who approached. Patient, attentive, never rushing. The way he wrote down every detail, no matter how small. The way his shoulders carried a weight that seemed both heavy and necessary. Around noon, a car appeared at the end of the street. Dark sedan, tinted windows, the same one Silas had seen the day before. It stopped, engine idling, watching. The conversations on the lawn faltered. Eyes turned toward the vehicle. The air shifted, tension replacing warmth. Raphael straightened, his gaze fixed on the car. He didn't move, didn't react, just watched. Jonas stepped beside him. "They want us to know they're here. Let them know we're not afraid," for 2 full minutes. Nothing happened. The car sat. The neighborhood stood. A standoff without words. Then, slowly, the car pulled away. It rounded the corner and disappeared. A collective breath released. "They're getting nervous," Silas said quietly, "which means we're getting close." By afternoon, the table had transformed into a command center. Documents sorted by date, by type, by level of urgency. A timeline had emerged, not just of the Carter case, but of a pattern stretching across the entire south side of the city. Marcus, the teenager who'd filmed the initial invasion, approached Raphael with his phone extended. "Got the full video," he said. "The one from when they took the Carter house, 37 minutes of footage, shows everything. The documents they held up, the things they said, the way they threatened the volunteer." Raphael took the phone. Scrolling through, his jaw tightened at certain moments. At one point, he paused, zoomed in on a document visible in frame. "There," he said, showing Jonas. "That signature. See the way the pen lifted between letters?" Jonas studied it, then nodded. "Same technique as the Garcia case. Same forger. Which means it's organized. This isn't random fraud. It's a system." The neighborhood organization that Maria had mentioned sent a representative, a determined woman named Carla Vega, who arrived with binders full of case files and contact information for journalists she trusted. "We've been trying to expose this for a year," Carla said. "But every time we get close, witnesses back out. Documents disappear. Leads go cold." She looked at the assembled group, the maps and papers and determined faces. "This is the most organized effort I've seen, if you're serious. We might actually have a chance." Raphael met her gaze. We're serious. Mila tugged at his sleeve. He looked down at her, his expression softening. Will you find Mama? She asked. For real. He crouched to her level, something he found himself doing often now. I'm going to try my hardest. That's a promise. She considered this for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the card, the one with the code, the one her mother had hidden for her. You keep it, she said, pressing it into his palm. Mama said people with this code protect each other. Raphael's throat tightened. He curled his fingers around the card, feeling its worn edges. Yeah, he said quietly. We do. Night fell differently now over Maple Hill, where there had once been a certain comfort in darkness, the soft glow of porch lights, the distant murmur of televisions through open windows. There was now a watchfulness. Curtains parted at the sound of engines, doors locked earlier than usual. The neighborhood had learned that safety was not a given. Molly noticed it first. The car. It appeared around 9 o'clock, parking at the far end of the street. Engine off, lights dark, just sitting, watching. She was helping Mrs. Henderson wash dishes when she saw it through the kitchen window, her hands stilled in the soapy water. Call Raphael, she said quietly by the time he arrived, walking calmly from 3 houses down, where he'd been reviewing documents with Jonas. The car hadn't moved. It sat there like a held breath, promising nothing, threatening everything. Raphael stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, arms crossed, studying the vehicle. Then he walked toward it. Not aggressive, not fast, just steady. Deliberate. The car started its engine when he was 15 feet away. Headlights flicked on, cutting through the darkness. For a moment they faced each other, man and machine, past and present. Then the car pulled away, tires crunching on asphalt, disappearing around the corner. Raphael returned to Mrs. Henderson's porch, his face unreadable. They're testing us, he said, seeing how we react. What do we do? Molly's voice carried an edge of fear she couldn't hide. We don't react. That's what they want. Panic, mistakes, reasons to escalate. He looked at the gathered faces. Mrs. Henderson, Molly, Mr. Peterson, a few others who'd drifted over at the commotion. We stay focused. We gather evidence. We make our case airtight. Mila had been asleep in the guest room, but the voices woke her. She appeared at the screen door, rabbit in arms, eyes wide in the dim light. Raphael's expression shifted when he saw her. Something protective, something fierce. Hey, he said gently. Everything's okay? Just some visitors they left? Bad visitors. He considered lying, decided against it. Not good ones, but they can't hurt us if we're careful. Mila nodded slowly. She seemed to accept this, the idea that danger existed, but could be managed, that fear didn't have to mean surrender. Mama was careful, she said, and they still took her. The words hit Raphael like a physical blow. He had no answer that would satisfy a 6-year-old's logic, no comfort that wouldn't feel hollow. So he told the truth. You're right. Sometimes being careful isn't enough. Sometimes the bad things happen anyway. He moved closer, crouching to her level. But that's why we have each other now. More eyes, more hands, more people who won't let them win. The next morning brought a different kind of assault. Molly found the note tucked under her car's windshield wiper. Simple white paper, typed words, mind your own business. Some questions have dangerous answers. She brought it to Raphael without touching it further, her hands shaking. Fingerprints won't matter, Jonas said, examining it through a plastic bag. These people are too smart for that, but it tells us something. They know who's helping. They're watching more closely than we thought. Silas had been digging through county records all night. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his voice carried a current of excitement. Found something, he said, spreading printouts across the table. The supervisor overseeing property transfers for the Hartwell Group, a man named Daniel Vance. He's been signing off on every fraudulent case we've identified. But here's the interesting part. 6 months ago, Mila Carter filed a formal complaint with the city's housing department. The complaint named Vance directly. The room went quiet. She knew, Caleb said softly. She knew who was behind it. And then she disappeared. Raphael stared at the documents, pieces falling into place like a lock clicking open. This isn't just about property fraud. It's about silencing the one person who could expose the whole operation. Jonas pointed to a specific page. Look at this. 2 days before Evelyn vanished. There's a notation in the housing department records. A scheduled meeting between her and an internal investigator. The meeting never happened. The investigator was transferred to a different department the same week. Convenient, Silas muttered. Raphael reached into his pocket and pulled out the card Mila had given him. The code stared back at him. 41B. She knew this might happen, he said. She prepared for it, left this for Mila as insurance. His fingers tightened around the card. She trusted that someone would come, that the code would mean something. It does mean something, Caleb said. It means she believed in you. All of you. Raphael looked at the others. Jonas, steady and observant. Caleb, patient and thorough. Silas, relentless in his pursuit of truth. Men who had made mistakes, who had lived in shadows, who had clawed their way toward light. Men who now had a chance to prove they deserved that light. Tomorrow, Raphael said, we compile everything, and we find a way to make them listen. The dining room at Mrs. Henderson's house had transformed into a war room. Papers covered every surface. The table, the chairs, sections of the floor, string-connected photographs to documents, creating a web that looked like something from a detective film. Coffee cups accumulated in corners. The air smelled of printer ink and determination. Raphael stood at the center, orchestrating the chaos. Timeline's solid, Jonas reported, pinning another sheet to the wall. We've got documented cases going back 18 months. Same pattern every time. Sudden default notices, forged signatures, families evicted within a week. 23 households confirmed. Caleb looked up from his notebook. The lawyer I contacted, Sandra Reyes. She's reviewed the documents. Says we have enough to file a formal challenge with the housing court. But more importantly, she thinks we have enough for a press conference. Press conference? Molly sat at the edge of the room, exhausted but alert. Are we ready for that? We have to be, Silas said. He'd been working his phone all morning, coordinating with Carla's organization and reaching out to journalists. There's a city council meeting tomorrow. Public comment period. If we present our evidence there, on the record, they can't ignore it. The scope of what they'd uncovered had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. The Hartwell Group wasn't just a predatory real estate company. It was part of a network that reached into the city housing department, involved kickbacks to inspectors, and had connections that protected it from investigation. But Evelyn had seen through it, before anyone else. She had noticed the patterns, gathered the evidence, prepared to expose everything, and then she had vanished. There's one more thing, Silas said, his voice careful. He pulled out a small notebook, leather-bound, worn, filled with cramped handwriting. I found this at the community center. Evelyn left it there, hidden in a supply closet, 3 days before she disappeared. Raphael took the notebook, handling it like something sacred. The pages were filled with numbers, dates, names, a coded record of everything Evelyn had learned. She was building a case, he said quietly, on her own, for months. Near the back of the notebook, a loose page had been folded and tucked between leaves. Raphael opened it carefully. It was a letter. To whoever finds this, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this notebook stays hidden forever and I can laugh about my paranoia someday. But if not, if I'm gone, please take care of Mila. She's everything to me. Everything. The code 41B will mean something to someone. A man named Raphael Knox. I saved his life once, though he wouldn't see it that way. He's good, better than he knows. If he receives this code, he'll come. All the evidence is in the notebook. The final documents, the ones that prove everything, are in a safety deposit box at First Community Bank. Box 41. The key is with Mrs. Lively on Birch Street. She doesn't know what it's for. I asked her to hold it for me. Please finish what I started. Not for me, for Mila, for all the families they've hurt. Evelyn in the room was silent when Raphael finished reading aloud. Mila had been listening from the doorway, her rabbit clutched to her chest. She walked forward slowly, her small hand reaching for the letter. Can I see? She asked. Raphael handed it to her gently. She couldn't read all the words, but she traced her mother's handwriting with her finger, her lips moving silently. She knew, Mila said finally. She knew the bad people might take her, but she left us a map. Raphael nodded, his throat tight. Yeah, she left us a map. Within the hour, Jonas had retrieved the key from Mrs. Lively, a kind, bewildered woman who remembered Evelyn asking her to hold something important, but had never asked questions. The safety deposit box at First Community Bank contained exactly what Evelyn had promised. Original documents with visible alterations, recordings of threatening phone calls, photographs of Daniel Vance meeting with known associates, and a sworn statement describing everything she'd witnessed. It was enough, more than enough. That evening, Sandra Reyes reviewed the final compilation. When she finished, she looked up at Raphael with something like awe. "This is comprehensive," she said. "This is bulletproof. Whoever Evelyn Carter was, she was brilliant. She was a mother," Raphael said simply, "who loved her daughter enough to fight." The city council meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock the next evening. They were ready. The city hall chamber smelled of old wood and furniture polish, its walls lined with portraits of mayors past, its seats filling with people who rarely attended public meetings. Word had spread, through the neighborhood grapevine, through social media posts, through careful calls to journalists who had been waiting for a story like this. Raphael stood near the front, his prepared statement folded in his pocket. Behind him sat Jonas, Caleb and Silas beside them, Molly with Mila on her lap in the rows behind, the faces of Maple Hill, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Peterson, Maria Santos, the Martinez family, Mrs. Chen, Marcus with his phone ready to record, Carla Vega with her binders, and dozens of others who had suffered in silence and were now ready to speak. The council members took their seats, shuffling papers, murmuring to aides. They looked unprepared for the crowd. The public comment period began routinely. Complaints about potholes, questions about parking permits, the usual municipal concerns. Then Sandra Reyes approached the microphone. "Council members, my name is Sandra Reyes. I'm an attorney representing multiple families from the Maple Hill neighborhood who have been victims of systematic property fraud." The chamber's energy shifted. Whispers rippled through the audience. A council member leaned forward. Sandra spoke for 10 minutes, outlining the pattern, introducing the evidence, naming names. She was precise, devastating, and calm. Then she yielded the floor to Raphael. He walked to the microphone slowly, aware of every eye on him. His hands were steady. His voice was clear. "My name is Raphael Knox. 12 years ago, I was on the wrong side of everything. I made choices I'm not proud of. Lived a life that hurt people. But a woman named Evelyn Carter decided I deserved a second chance. She didn't know me, had no reason to help, but she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." He paused, collecting himself. 3 weeks ago, Evelyn disappeared. She had been investigating the very fraud Ms. Reyes just described. She gathered evidence, documented everything, prepared to expose a system that was stealing homes from families who had nothing left to lose. He held up the notebook. "This is her work, her courage, her sacrifice." One by one, others approached the microphone. Mr. Peterson described the intimidation he'd faced. Maria Santos showed her video evidence. The Martinez family spoke about losing their home, their children's school, their sense of safety. Then Daniel Vance's representative tried to intervene, a slick man in an expensive suit, speaking of misunderstandings and procedural errors. But Sandra was ready. She produced the documents from Evelyn's safety deposit box, the original papers alongside the forged ones. The difference is unmistakable. She played a recording of a threatening phone call, the voice clearly identified. The representative's confidence crumbled. Council members exchanged glances. Journalists scribbled furiously. The chamber fell silent. Then the door at the back opened. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-word. A woman stood in the doorway. She was thin, thinner than the photographs had shown, and her face carried the exhaustion of weeks spent hiding. But her eyes were bright, alive, scanning the room until they found what they were searching for. "Mila, Mama?" The word escaped as a whisper. Evelyn Carter walked down the aisle, her steps unsteady but determined. The crowd parted before her, faces registering shock, recognition, hope. Mila slid from Molly's lap and ran. They met in the middle of the chamber, mother and daughter, colliding in an embrace that needed no words. Evelyn dropped to her knees, pulling Mila close, her body shaking with sobs she'd held back for 3 weeks. "I'm here," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left." The chamber watched in silence. Some wiped their eyes. Others simply stared, witnesses to a reunion they hadn't dared to imagine. When Evelyn finally looked up, her gaze found Raphael. "You came," she said. "You called." His voice was rough. 41B. "I promised." She nodded, tears streaming. "I know. I knew you would." The chamber remained frozen in the aftermath of Evelyn's entrance, as if reality needed a moment to reassemble itself around this impossible fact. The missing woman was alive, Mila refused to let go, her small arms wrapped around her mother's neck, her face buried in Evelyn's shoulder, her body trembling with the release of weeks of fear. Evelyn held her just as tightly, one hand stroking her daughter's hair, the other pressed flat against her back as if confirming she was real. "I thought you were gone," Mila whispered. "I thought the bad people took you forever." "No, baby, no," Evelyn's voice cracked. "I had to hide. I had to make sure you'd be safe, but I never stopped thinking about you. Not for 1 second." The council chairman cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the proceedings. "Ma'am, Mrs. Carter, we need to understand what's happening here. You've been missing for 3 weeks. There's a police report." Evelyn stood slowly, keeping Mila's hand in hers. Her voice was stronger now, steadied by purpose. 3 weeks ago, I received a threat. Not the first one, but the most specific. They knew where Mila went to school. They knew what time she walked home. They told me that if I presented my evidence, something would happen to her, the chamber murmured. Journalists leaned forward. So I ran. I left everything. My home, my daughter, my life. And I hid. A neighbor, Mrs. Lively, took me in. She didn't ask questions. She just gave me a room and kept my secret. Evelyn's gaze swept the crowd, finding the faces of people who had suffered the same predation. I watched from hiding while they stole my house. I watched while they tried to erase me, and I hated myself for not being braver. Raphael stepped forward. "You were brave enough to prepare. You left the evidence. You left the code." Evelyn nodded, her eyes filling again. "I hoped someone would find it. I prayed. Someone did." He held up the notebook. Mila did. Mother and daughter looked at each other. Something passed between them. Pride, sorrow, love that had survived separation. The council chairman spoke again. His tone changed now, sobered by what he was witnessing. "Mrs. Carter, the evidence presented today is substantial. If what you're claiming is true, it's true." Sandra Reyes stood, her voice cutting clean. "And there's more. In the safety deposit box Mrs. Carter prepared, there are documents that directly implicate Daniel Vance in criminal conspiracy, witness intimidation, and fraud. I'm prepared to submit these to the city attorney's office tonight." A commotion arose in the back of the chamber. Vance's representative was on his phone, speaking urgently. Other suited figures were already moving toward the exits. But it was too late. The story was out. Marcus was live streaming. Carla Vega had texted her journalist contacts. The evidence was already being downloaded, copied, shared. "I want my house back," Evelyn said quietly, but her voice carried through the chamber. "I want my daughter's home restored. I want every family who lost their property to this scheme to have a chance at justice." The applause started slowly. Mrs. Henderson clapping her aged hands together, then Mr. Peterson, then Maria Santos, then wave after wave of Maple Hill residents rising to their feet. Mila tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Are we going home now?" Evelyn looked at Raphael, at the men who had answered her call, at the community that had refused to let her disappear. "Yes, baby," she said. "We're going home." In the days that followed, things moved quickly. Daniel Vance was arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. The Hartwell Group's operations were frozen pending investigation. The City Housing Department launched an internal review, suspending 3 employees. Property transfers were reversed. Families began returning to their homes. Jonas worked with Sandra Reyes to process legal documents. Caleb helped the community center establish a new housing assistance program. Silas coordinated with the investigative journalists who were now digging into the full scope of the corruption. And Evelyn, finally safe, finally able to breathe, began the process of rebuilding. "I don't know how to thank you," she told Raphael one afternoon, sitting on Mrs. Henderson's porch while Mila played in the yard. "You could have ignored the code. You had your own life, your own peace." Raphael watched Mila chasing butterflies, her laughter carrying on the breeze. "The code wasn't just a call for help," he said slowly. "It was a reminder of who I used to be, of who I wanted to become." He turned to face Evelyn. "You saved me once, gave me a chance when no one else would. This was always going to be the payment. Some debts can't be paid, maybe not, but some can be honored." 3 weeks later, the Carter house stood transformed. The morning had begun early, with trucks arriving before sunrise, carrying lumber, paint, tools, and enough coffee to fuel an army. By the time the sun cleared the rooftops, Maple Hill had become a work site, but not the kind that took, the kind that gave. Raphael stood on a ladder, sanding the exterior trim with methodical strokes. The motion was meditative, the rasp of sandpaper against wood, a rhythm he could lose himself in. Below, Jonas measured boards for the new front porch railing, his precision unchanged from his old life, but now directed toward building rather than breaking. Caleb painted the shutters a deep blue, Mila's choice, while Silas rewired the porch light, his movements careful and deliberate. They worked without speaking much, the kind of silence that exists between people who have learned to trust each other. The neighborhood had arrived in force. Mrs. Henderson supervised the food table, arranging dishes that kept appearing as neighbors came and went. Mr. Peterson, despite his age, insisted on helping with the garden, digging holes for the new rose bushes that would replace the ones trampled during the invasion. Maria Santos documented everything, her phone capturing images that would later become part of the community center's wall of hope. Marcus hauled debris to the trailer, his headphones around his neck for once. Actually talking to people, Mrs. Chen had brought her famous dumplings, which disappeared within an hour. The Martinez children ran through the yard with Mila, their laughter forming a counterpoint to the hammer strikes and drill whirs. Evelyn moved through it all like someone still learning to believe in her own presence. She had lost weight during her weeks in hiding, and the shadows under her eyes hadn't fully faded, but she smiled, genuinely smiled, as she handed out water bottles, thanked volunteers, and paused every few minutes to watch Mila play. The guilt still visited her at night. The choice to leave her daughter, even to protect her, felt like a wound that might never fully heal. But Mila was resilient in ways that constantly surprised her. The nightmares were fading. The questions came less frequently. And when Evelyn tucked her in at night, Mila would say, "You came back," as if confirming a truth she needed to hear. "Always," Evelyn would answer. "Always." By late afternoon, the work was nearly complete. Fresh paint gleamed in the golden light. New boards replaced rotted ones. The garden was cleared and planted. The house looked like it had been renewed from the inside out, which in a way it had. Raphael climbed down from his ladder, wiping his hands on his jeans. He was tired in a way that felt good, the kind of exhaustion that comes from meaningful labor. Mila appeared beside him, her rabbit tucked under one arm. She had grown comfortable with him over these weeks, seeking him out with questions, observations, and the occasional shy smile. "Mr. Raphael, just Raphael," he said, crouching to her level. "What's up?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a frame, simple wood, clearly handmade, probably from the craft supplies at the community center. Inside the frame was the card, 41B. "I want you to have this," she said. "Mama said the code brought you to us, so you should keep it." Raphael took the frame carefully, turning it over in his hands. Such a small thing, a few characters on an old card, but it had set everything in motion. The calls, the arrivals, the investigation, the reunification. It had meant trust when trust was hardest to give. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This was your mom's. Mama said it's yours now." Mila smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "She said people with that code protect each other, and you protected us." Raphael's throat tightened. He had spent years trying to outrun his past, to prove he was more than his mistakes. He had done good work, built honest relationships, contributed to his community, but something had always felt incomplete, as if redemption required a witness. Now, holding this frame, he understood. It wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about answering the call when it came, about being the person someone believed you could be. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "I'll keep this forever." Evelyn approached, her arms crossed against the cooling evening air. She looked at the frame, at her daughter, at the man who had answered a code from another lifetime. "Mila's right," she said softly. "You kept your promise. All of you did." Raphael stood, the frame still in his hands around them. The neighborhood continued its celebration, music playing from someone's porch, children laughing, the clink of glasses, and the murmur of conversations. The house stood behind them, whole again, a testament to what community could accomplish when it chose to fight for its own. "It wasn't just us," Raphael said. "It was everyone, this whole street, this whole neighborhood." He looked at the gathered crowd, at the faces that had once been strangers and were now something more. "We just showed up. They made it happen." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, casting long shadows across the restored lawn. Jonas and Caleb were packing up tools. Silas was helping Mrs. Henderson carried leftover food inside. The Martinez children had collapsed on the grass, exhausted from play. Mila tugged at her mother's hand. "Can we stay outside and watch the stars come out?" Evelyn smiled. For a little while, they sat together on the new porch steps. Mother, daughter, and the man who had crossed years to answer a call. The first stars appeared as the sky deepened, pinpricks of light in the gathering dark. "Mama." Mila's voice was drowsy, her head resting against Evelyn's shoulder. "Yes, baby. You said people with the code protect each other. Does that mean Raphael is family now?" Evelyn looked at Raphael. Something passed between them. Not romance, but recognition. The kind of bond that forms when two people have seen each other at their most vulnerable and chosen trust anyway. "I think it does," Evelyn said. "In a way," Raphael nodded slowly. "Family's not always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up." Mila smiled, her eyes closing. "Good," she murmured, "because I like having a bigger family." The stars multiplied as darkness settled over Maple Hill. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing guitar. Voices drifted on the warm air. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the scent of Mrs. Henderson's roses. Raphael looked at the frame in his hands, at the code that had changed everything. 41B, a reminder, a promise, a beginning. He had spent so long believing that his past defined his future, that the mistakes he'd made had drawn boundaries around what he could become. But Evelyn had seen past those boundaries 12 years ago, and Mila had done the same 3 weeks ago. They had believed in a version of him. He was only now learning to see. The debt was paid, but more importantly, the cycle was complete. The woman who had saved him had been saved in return. The child who had trusted a stranger now had her mother back, and the community that had watched in fear had found its voice. Redemption, Raphael realized, wasn't a destination. It was a practice, a daily choice to be better than yesterday, to answer the calls that came, to show up when showing up was hard. He stood, stretching muscles tired from good work, and looked one more time at the house. Whole, renewed, home. "Same time next week," Jonas called from the sidewalk. "Thompson family on Oak Street needs help with their roof," Raphael smiled. "I'll be there, always, for as long as he could," because that was what the code meant now. Not a marker from his old life, but a compass for his new one. Mila had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder. Evelyn lifted her gently, cradling her close. "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper, "for everything." Raphael watched them go inside, watched the porch light flicker on, watched the door close softly. Then he turned toward home, the frame in his pocket, the stars above, and the warm certainty that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to become the person he was meant to be. Every act of courage, no matter how small, creates ripples that can change lives far beyond what we imagine. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged not from blood, but from the simple choice to show up when someone needs us most. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a reminder that second chances are real, and that communities can accomplish remarkable things when they stand together. Would you like another story?